So we're going to start with a brief review of embryogenesis and birth. If you guys have been following us from the beginning, Janelle did go over this in her reproduction lecture, but I thought it was pretty pertinent to what we're learning today. So I wanted to start from conception, and then we're going to go from there. So I just want to make sure everybody understands these concepts as well, because they're pretty important for the MCAT. So as you guys should know, the zygote is the first product that's formed after fertilization. It's the diploid cell that results from fertilization, and it enters cleavage about 36 hours after. So cleavage is just the splitting of the zygote into multiple cells. It becomes what is known as the morula. So the zygote and the morula are the same size, even though the morula has gone through multiple rounds of cell division. So this first stage, the zygote really is just trying to divide. It doesn't spend a lot of time in interphase. In fact, I'm not even sure if it enters interphase at all. It's just constantly dividing. It's not making more cytoplasm. It's not making more, it's not going through these normal metabolic processes that somatic cells will. It's just dividing. So that's why we see a division of cell, but we don't see an increase in volume because it's really just trying to proliferate. So next, the morula becomes what we call a blastocyst in a process known as blastulation. So blastulation occurs as the morula continues to divide. The trophoblast develops around a cavity known as the blastocele, and the inner cell mass forms at one end of the trophoblast. So if you look at the bottom over here, we have the morula, which is present at about 4 to 5 days. And then at that 6th day, the cells start to differentiate a little bit more, and it creates what we call a blastocyst. So you see these cells surrounding the blastocyst. Those are the trophoblast cells. These lighter cells over here that are stuck to one side are known as the inner cell mass. And this empty space right over here is a fluid-filled cavity, and we call that the blastocele. So the inner cell mass will eventually become the embryo. The trophoblasts, which remember are these cells that are outside, will become the chorion. And the chorion is just a structure that eventually becomes the placenta. And as we know, the placenta aids in gas and nutrient exchange between the fetus and the mother. Okay. And then the next stage is called gastrulation. So the blastocyst turns into a gastrula, and this occurs about a week after fertilization. So at this point, the blastocyst is going to implant into the endometrium, and that's when gastrulation begins. So this is really where differentiation starts to take off. This is when the germ layers, they give rise, the inner cell mass gives rise to a structure known as the embryonic disc, which actually comes before the germ layers, and then the embryonic disc turns into these three. So we did go over this, like I said, in Janelle's lectures, but I just wanted to touch upon it briefly. So I put this chart down here. If you guys want to come back to it, it's a great study resource. The ectoderm is responsible for the epidermis, the central nervous system, and all of the neural crest derivatives. So most of your nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, melanocytes, facial cartilage, dentin of teeth, skull bones, the ectoderm. So some mnemonics that I have come across when I was studying, I've heard of the ectoderm referred to as the attractoderm. So they call it the attractoderm because it's, potentially it gives rise to cells that we would find attractive in someone. So someone has nice skin, nails, eyes. It gives rise to all of those tissues and all of those cells. So if it helps you by remembering the ectoderm is the attractoderm, you can definitely think of it like that. The mesoderm, meso meaning middle, gives rise to bones, cartilage, tendons, muscle, smooth and striated circulatory system, the lymphatic system, the gonads, kidney, adipose tissue, and the notochord. So the mesoderm, the mnemonic that I remember for the mesoderm is that it's the means of movement. So the mesoderm usually gives rise to, bones and muscle, things that help us move. Your circulatory system is moving blood around your body. The lymphatic system is moving stuff around your body. The gonads, if you think about it more, abstractly, the gonads are helping you move through time. So reproduction helps you move through time. Muscle and skeletal tissue help you move physically. So the mesoderm is the means of movement. And the endoderm is just, more of your internal organs. So the digestive system, the respiratory tract, the pancreas, liver, thyroid, parathyroid, a lot of hormonal organs and a lot of internal organs, your digestive system, endo meaning inside. So a lot of those internal structures arise from the endoderm. So you should definitely look this over. You can, try to come up with your own mnemonics. But the three germ layers is definitely something that they like to test. So I definitely think it's worth your time spending and just remembering. I mean, sometimes it's impossible to remember every single structure that arises from each germ layer, but it's important that you memorize at least a couple that come from each, the most common ones. Okay, so the next step we have is neurulation. So after the germ layer is developed, the nervous system forms next, and this process is known as neurulation. So the ectoderm, like we said before, gives rise to the neural plate and the neural crest cells, because remember the ectoderm gives rise to the central and peripheral nervous system, and it's the attractoderm. So it also gives rise to skin, nails, those sorts of tissue. So the neural plate folds into itself, creating a neural tube, which eventually gives rise to the central nervous system. So I placed this graphic right to the right. You can take a look at the top. The neural plate is here in purple. So it's sort of, folded in half. This will eventually become the epidermis, this blue outer, and then the neural plate border is going to fold over and will become the neural crest cells. But if you look one step down, you can see actually how it folds inward on itself. These neural crest cells bend over to touch themselves. They converge at the top of the neural groove. And then once that convergence is complete, the neural groove turns into the neural tube. These neural crest cells are surrounding and the epidermis is on top. So the epidermis will eventually become your skin and the neural tube will eventually develop into the central nervous system around your backbone. So after differentiation, birth, and early life. So at 8 weeks gestation, the embryo can now be referred to as a fetus. So it's developing more human-like features. Toward the end of pregnancy, the mother's respiratory rate, blood volume, GFR, and other vital processes all increase as the fetus develops into an independent human. And that tracks pretty logically because as this fetus is developing into a full-blown human, it's going to need more resources. So it's going to need more oxygen, it's going to need more nutrients, and likewise, it's going to be giving off more waste products. So it would make sense that the mother's GFR also increases. So all of these processes vital for living are going to increase as the baby gets bigger. Yeah, GFR is glomerular filtration rate. It's just about how much blood the kidneys can filter per minute. So if you want a quick refresher, I did a lesson on the renal system last week, so you can definitely look at those slides. Feel free to go to the YouTube channel and look at that as well, because GFR is definitely something that you should be familiar with as well. So birth is also known as parturition. It occurs when contractions of the uterine muscles begin. These contractions are repressed throughout pregnancy by the high levels of progesterone throughout. They most likely begin in the late third trimester due to an increase in oxytocin and also physical stretching of the uterus and the cervix. So as the child gets bigger, it's going to be pushing against the uterus and it's going to be pushing onto the cervix for the first time. So most scientists believe that in combination of a couple of other factors, it's not completely 100% clear, but it's definitely with the spike in oxytocin. I've even heard some theories regarding the circulation of fetal DNA, like increases in that. But all you have to know in terms of oxytocin is that it's repressed by progesterone, and when it increases towards contraction, it actually causes contraction in a positive feedback loop, actually. So estrogen and progesterone levels during pregnancy also inhibit the release of prolactin. So prolactin is responsible for milk letdown. So after birth, estrogen and progesterone levels fall and prolactin levels rise. So when prolactin levels rise, that allows the mother to produce milk. So prolactin levels surge actually every time the infant breastfeeds. And prolactin levels will remain high and they will continue to surge every time the child breastfeeds. They will not decrease to pre-pregnancy levels until the child is no longer breastfeeding. So as long as the child is breastfeeding, those prolactin levels will surge. And milk letdown, which is just another name for milk production, will occur in the mother.